"Why, oh, you're fired," barked Richard Mallory, slamming his fist onto the polished mahogany desk of his corner office. The blinds were drawn halfway, but the golden Manhattan sunset still spilled in defiantly, highlighting the sneer that curled at the edge of his lips. His piercing blue eyes stared, daggers at the young man in front of him. Marcus Caldwell stood still, calm, his hands clasped in front of him. Tall, athletic, his sharp-tailored suit crisp despite the long day. He looked more like a CEO than an employee, certainly not someone accustomed to being spoken to like trash. His deep, brown eyes didn't flinch. "May I ask why, Mr. Mallory?" Marcus said, his voice low but unwavering. "Oh, please," Richard scoffed. "Cut the act. You think that Ivy League degree gives you a free pass. This is my company. I don't owe you an explanation. You do," Marcus said, stepping forward slightly. "Especially since I've outperformed every member of the executive team for 3 consecutive quarters." Richard's face tightened. "That's exactly the problem. Caldwell, you're too good. Always have to be the star, huh? And don't play dumb with me. I know what you people are, like." Marcus's jaw flexed. "What people? You know damn well what I mean," Richard hissed. "You walk in here, all proud, acting like you own the place, like you're entitled to success, but not on my watch. You're done here. Security will escort you out." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the hum of the AC seemed to hush in shock. Marcus didn't speak. Not yet. He simply reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone, calmly typing something. "What? Texting your lawyer?" Richard laughed. "Good luck. I've crushed better suits than you before. Breakfast." Marcus put his phone away. "No, I just informed the board." Richard blinked. "The board. That's right." Marcus straightened his cuffs. "All 23 members, including Chairwoman Hargrove. Oh, and President Biden's office." "What the hell are you talking about?" Richard snapped, suddenly less amused. Marcus stepped closer. "You didn't even read my resume, did you? You didn't know who I was when you hired me. Just another diversity checkbox for your shareholders, right?" Richard's mouth opened, but nothing came out. "I'm not just an analyst," Marcus said. "I'm Marcus Caldwell, son of Elijah Caldwell. Yes, that Elijah Caldwell, former Secretary of the Treasury. My godfather is David Hargrove, former CEO of Citigroup. I have 3 degrees from Yale, including a JD. I turned down the White House economic advisory role to come work here undercover. You know why." Richard backed up slowly, bumping into his desk. "Because this company was on a list," Marcus said, his voice colder now. "A list of firms with disproportionate executive biases, especially toward black professionals. A list that Congress has been monitoring. And you, Mr. Mallory, just gave them everything they need." "You're bluffing," Richard said, but his voice cracked. "Oh, you think I'm lying?" Marcus stepped forward again, towering now. "Call the number in my contact list. Ask for Director Freeman. You'll find out real quick what mistake you just made." Richard staggered into his chair, his skin pale. You set me up." "No," Marcus said. "You set yourself up. I gave you every chance to treat me with dignity. But your racism wouldn't let you see past my skin. And now it's going to cost you everything." "Wait, Marcus, Mr. Caldwell," Richard stammered. "Look, let's be reasonable. Maybe we can reconsider." "I mean, you don't need to reconsider," Marcus said coolly, "because the board just voted. You're out." Richard froze. "Wah, you're fired." Richard's mouth opened in stunned silence. The words caught somewhere between disbelief and dread. He stared at Marcus, as if seeing him for the first time, not as the junior executive he thought he could dismiss with a wave, but as a man of power, pedigree, and purpose. His face turned crimson as the weight of Marcus's words landed fully. "You're bluffing," he whispered again. But even to his own ears, the doubt was clear. Marcus didn't reply. Instead, he turned and walked to the office door, opened it calmly, and gestured toward the hallway. "Janine," he said to Richard's assistant, who sat frozen at her desk. Please inform the boardroom that Richard Mallory will be joining them shortly to formally announce his resignation, effective immediately. Janine's eyes widened. Marcus gave her a gentle smile. It's all right. You've always treated people with respect. You have nothing to worry about. She nodded quickly and picked up the phone. Richard finally found his voice again. You think you can waltz in here, manipulate your way up the ladder, and just destroy me like this? Marcus turned slowly, his voice deadly calm. I didn't manipulate anything. I did the work. I put in the hours. You were just too arrogant to see who was right in front of you. You arrogant son of a— I'm not arrogant, Marcus interrupted. I'm done being underestimated. He walked out, leaving the door open. Richard sat there, trembling, sweat now forming on his temples despite the cold blast from the AC vent above. 30 minutes later, the boardroom was packed. Richard stood at the head of the long glass table, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped the back of the chair. The room buzzed with tension, members murmuring, eyes darting between him and Marcus, who stood tall at the far end, arms folded. Chairwoman Evelyn Hargrove sat at the center, her silver hair gleaming under the recessed lights, her expression unreadable. She tapped a pen against her notepad once, sharply, silencing the whispers. Well, Mr. Mallory, she said, we're waiting. Richard licked his lips, then cleared his throat. I believe I may have acted in haste regarding the dismissal of Mr. Caldwell. Upon further reflection— You mean after realizing who his family is? Evelyn cut in coolly. He flushed. That's not what I meant. You fired the company's top-performing strategist without cause, she said, and used racially inflammatory language. While doing so, we have 3 witnesses, including your assistant, and Marcus, as I'm sure you now realize, records all key conversations legally, of course, thanks to the clause in his contract, the one you didn't bother to read. Gasps rippled around the table. Richard turned to Marcus, his face pale. You set this up. I documented everything, Marcus said evenly. Not to trap you, but to protect myself. From people like you. Evelyn set her pen down. The board has reviewed the evidence. Your behavior has not only jeopardized this firm's reputation, it's confirmed long-standing suspicions of systemic bias under your leadership. You are hereby removed as CEO effective immediately. No, Richard whispered, please. I built this company, and now it will move forward without you, Evelyn said firmly. You have 1 hour to vacate your office. Security is waiting outside. He stood there, frozen, as if the air had been sucked from the room. Marcus stepped forward. I'm not taking your job, Richard. That's not why I came here. But I will be overseeing the transition as special advisor to the Federal Oversight Committee on Corporate Equity and Inclusion. A hush fell. Jesus, one board member muttered under their breath. Richard's knees gave a little. He gripped the chair to steady himself. I didn't know. That's the point, Marcus said softly. You never cared to know. 2 days later, the story was everywhere. Racist CEO fired after discriminatory outburst employee was undercover government advisor. News outlets swarmed the building. Shareholders panicked. But inside, something remarkable began to shift. Janine brought Marcus a cup of coffee and set it down with a smile. You know, she said. We all knew there was something different about you. Something bigger. Marcus smiled back. I just wanted to be seen for what I could do. Well, you are now, she said. The staff, everyone's behind you that afternoon. Marcus stood in front of the entire company in the main auditorium. He wore a simple dark suit, no tie. His voice carried, firm but warm. You've all worked hard. Some of you have been here 20 years. And I know not all of you saw what was happening behind the scenes. But we're building a new culture now, one rooted in equity, transparency, and excellence. No one here will be judged by the color of their skin, but by the quality of their contribution. That's my promise. The crowd erupted in applause, and somewhere in the back, Evelyn Hargrove watched with a proud smile. But the story didn't end there, because Marcus's presence sent waves far beyond that company's glass doors. He became a symbol. Corporate boards across the country started revisiting their diversity policies. Firms invited him to speak. Some tried to poach him, but he had a different mission. One night, sitting on his apartment balcony, he got a call. "Marcus," said the voice on the other end. "It's the president. You ready to come back to D.C.?" Marcus looked out over the city, a city that once looked past him. He smiled. "I'm just getting started." Marcus Caldwell hadn't slept in nearly 36 hours. After the boardroom fallout, the media frenzy, and the avalanche of high-profile interviews and damage control meetings, he finally found a few hours of silence alone in his office. Not the one he used to sit in, back near the bullpen with the analysts. Now he was on the top floor, in the office that used to belong to Richard Mallory. The irony wasn't lost on him. The skyline stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls, but despite the prestige and the power, there was no vanity in Marcus's expression as he stood by the window, sipping cold coffee. There was only purpose. His phone buzzed again. Another missed call. He ignored it. Then came a knock. "Come in," he said, without turning. The door opened, and Evelyn Hargrove stepped in. No longer the stern boardroom commander. She looked almost maternal, now concerned, careful. "Thought you might want something that didn't taste like battery acid," she said, holding up a cup. He turned, smiled faintly. "You read my mind." She handed it over. "You all right?" Marcus paused. "Getting there." "You didn't ask for any of this, did you?" she said softly, gesturing around the room. "No," he said, but I couldn't ignore it either. Evelyn sat down, across from him. "I've seen a lot of men fight for power. Most of them had no idea what to do with it once they got it. You knew exactly what you were doing." Marcus looked out the window again. "When I was 10, my father brought me to a Senate hearing. He was still Secretary of the Treasury. Then, I watched a room full of old white men try to talk over him, outmaneuver him, and I watched him wait quiet, patient, and then absolutely dismantle every one of their arguments with facts, logic, and grace." He turned back to Evelyn. "I asked him later how he stayed so calm," he said, "because the truth doesn't panic. The truth just waits for its moment." Evelyn smiled faintly. "And now it's your moment." He nodded. "Not just mine, everyone's. The interns who never get promoted, the women who get talked over, the candidates who never make it to the final round because their name sounds too ethnic. All of them, a beat. I'm not here to burn it all down," he said. "I'm here to build something better." Evelyn stood, touched his shoulder gently. "Then, let's start." 3 weeks later, Caldwell Equity Initiative was launched. It wasn't just a PR stunt. It was a full structural overhaul of hiring practices, mentorship pipelines, and pay equity audits. Marcus partnered with economists, sociologists, civil rights lawyers, and even historians to root out the systemic patterns that had been baked into the corporate DNA. Resistance came swiftly. Some executives resigned. Others sent not so subtle threats. One anonymous letter even called him a diversity dictator. He kept that one pinned on his corkboard. Then came the first employee town hall. He stood before nearly 500 employees, live streamed to 6 other global offices, and began, "I'm not here to make you comfortable. I'm here to make things fair." Gasps, murmurs. But he continued, unapologetic. "Comfort is what allowed racism, sexism, and elitism to fester. So if you're worried that change means you'll lose something, maybe what you had wasn't earned to begin with." He let that sit. And then applause. Not everyone clapped, but enough did to let him know the tide was turning. Meanwhile, Richard Mallory's world unraveled. First came the severance clawback, then the second inquiry thanks to a long overlooked financial discrepancy tied to discriminatory hiring contracts. His name was stripped from the corporate building. The university that once named a lecture hall after him now issued a statement condemning his behavior. He tried to do a podcast. It got canceled after 2 episodes. And then, one rainy night, Richard showed up in the lobby of his former company, unshaven, slouched, no appointment. "I need to speak to Marcus Caldwell," he told the receptionist. The woman looked him up and down. "Do you have a meeting scheduled? I used to own this damn place," he growled. "Not anymore, sir." Before she could call security, the elevator opened and Marcus stepped out. The 2 men locked eyes. Richard looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "Please," he said. Marcus studied him. He looked not at the man who once barked at him across a desk, but at someone utterly hollowed out. A shell. "I don't think we have anything to say," Marcus said calmly. "I was wrong," Richard rasped. "I see that now." Marcus hesitated. "Good," he said. "Then do something with it." And he walked past him without another word. Back upstairs, Marcus sat with his team. The room buzzed with ideas, expansion of the mentorship network, new policies for supplier diversity, the rollout of a reverse mentoring program where junior employees could give direct feedback to senior leaders. Someone asked, "Do you think the other companies will follow?" Marcus smiled. "They will," he said, "eventually. Because we're not just changing policies, we're changing culture." "But what about the backlash?" another asked. "The old guard won't go quietly." "I don't need them to be quiet," Marcus said. "I just need them to be irrelevant." The following month, Marcus was invited to give a keynote at the United Nations Global Forum on Ethical Leadership. He stood beneath the iconic emblem, broadcast over 90 countries, and delivered a speech that would later be cited in academic journals and leadership courses. Diversity is not a favor. Inclusion is not a charity. These are not concessions, they are corrections. Corrections for centuries of imbalance, of blind spots, of barriers disguised as standards. He paused, scanning the room. "And if that makes you uncomfortable, then you're finally paying attention." Standing ovation. Even the translator paused for a moment to collect herself before continuing. Later that night, Marcus returned to his hotel suite. He opened his email and found one message at the top. From POTUS office, subject, "Your next step." He opened it. "Marcus, your country needs you. Let's talk." He leaned back in his chair, exhaustion pulling at his limbs, but deep in his chest, something else stirred. Not pride, not ambition, hope, real hope. And somewhere in the heart of New York, where one man's hate once tried to end him, another man's truth was just beginning to change the world. Marcus stared at the email for a long time. He wasn't surprised, not really. The writing had been on the wall ever since the story broke. Since the first senator called him privately. Since the cabinet member sent a handwritten note saying, "We've needed a Marcus Caldwell for decades." But it wasn't the attention or offers that weighed on him. It was the responsibility, the quiet, burning knowledge that everything he did from here on would echo far beyond him. He replied with one line, "Let's talk." 2 weeks later, Marcus found himself inside the West Wing. The Oval Office was smaller than he imagined, but the weight of history in the room made the air feel thick. The president, calm, sharp-eyed, and deeply tired in a way that spoke of long nights and heavier burdens, extended a hand. "Marcus," he said, "thank you for coming. Thank you for having me." They sat. "You made a hell of a statement," the president said. "Not just by what you said, but how you handled it. Discipline, clarity, and purpose. We could use that in the administration." "I'm not a politician," Marcus replied. "I'm not asking you to be." The president slid a folder across the table. Marcus opened it. A newly drafted position, senior advisor to the president on corporate ethics and economic equity. A cabinet-level appointment. Complete, with a direct seat on the National Economic Council. Marcus looked up. "This would give me federal oversight over private sector equity protocols." "That's right." The president nodded. "You'd work with Treasury, Labor, commerce. You'd help shape national standards not just for hiring, but for compensation, promotion, supplier diversity. You'd build the framework. Marcus closed the folder. And the pushback, he asked. Oh, the president chuckled darkly. They'll come for you. They'll say you're overreaching, radical, un-American. They already have. Then you've already passed the test. Marcus smiled. When do we start? The announcement hit the media like a bomb. Corporate watchdog turned policy architect. Marcus Caldwell joins White House. Some cheered, some jeered. One major news outlet ran a headline reading, "Affirmative Action Tyrant to Rewrite Corporate America." It trended for an hour before being ratioed into oblivion. Inside government, the real work began. Marcus entered every room with quiet certainty. He didn't argue loudly, he asked questions that made others uncomfortable. He didn't seek applause, he demanded receipts. He would review company reports, ask why only 2% of VPs were black, why women in tech were paid 81 cents to the dollar, why the same 5 Ivy League schools dominated the hiring pool. And when they gave excuses, he listened. Then he dismantled them, one by one. He launched a federal initiative called the Ledger, a national database where companies voluntarily disclosed hiring, promotion, and pay equity data. Within 3 months, 200 major corporations joined. By the 6th month, it was mandatory for any firm seeking federal contracts. A tech CEO protested in a hearing. This is an invasion of privacy. Marcus responded coolly, "You can't fix what you refuse to measure." Mic drop. He began publishing monthly equity audits, calling out both progress and failure. He gave no special treatment. One firm he'd worked for, early in his career, a prestigious consultancy, received a failing grade. They called to complain. He sent them a list of recommended reforms. Do the work, he said, or stop pretending. Meanwhile, back in New York, the company where it all began was thriving. Under new leadership, it had become a case study in turnaround culture. Promotions were being fast-tracked for deserving employees long overlooked. Janine, once Richard Mallory's assistant, was now director of operations. She wrote Marcus often, "We did it. You lit the fuse." Marcus would reply simply, "Keep burning it down and building it back better." Then one day, Marcus got a letter, real paper, no return address. The handwriting was shaky. "Mr. Caldwell, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know your dignity ruined me more than my own disgrace ever could. I was the kind of man who mistook confidence in a black man for arrogance and presence for threat. You taught me something by not fighting like I would have fought. I was wrong. I'm working now with a nonprofit in Detroit, helping ex-offenders get into the workforce. I tell them about you. Sometimes." Richard Marcus read it twice, then set it in his desk drawer and never replied. Some things don't need closure, just consequences. By the 1-year anniversary of his appointment, Marcus was a fixture on the Hill. Lawmakers, both parties respected him. Even the ones who didn't agree with him feared being caught unprepared in a hearing he attended. He spoke at Harvard, at Morehouse, at prisons, at high schools, in forgotten zip codes, everywhere. He carried the same message. Equity is not a favor. It's justice in motion. One night, he spoke to a crowd of young professionals. At a gala in D.C., the lights dimmed, phones filmed, voices quieted. "You might be wondering what it takes to change a system," he began. "The answer's simple." He paused. "Be undeniable." The applause shook the walls. But Marcus remained humble. He still called his mother every Sunday, still visited his father's grave on his birthday, still walked to the office without security when he could, nodding to strangers who nodded back like they knew him, not the title, but the truth of him. And one evening, as he exited a Capitol meeting, a young intern jogged after him. "Mr. Caldwell," she called. He turned. She was breathless, nervous, barely 20. "I just wanted to say, I watched what happened with Richard Mallory. I'm here because of you." I never thought someone like me could make it here. Marcus smiled gently. You can, he said. You already have. And then he walked into the night, the city lights catching the glint in his eyes. But there was still one more meeting that would change everything. A private session, deep inside the White House. Only 6 people present. The president turned to Marcus. We're drafting a new executive order, one that codifies ethical corporate benchmarks into federal law, a national mandate. We want you to lead the task force. Marcus nodded. Understood. And Marcus. Yes, sir. This could make you the most powerful person in the country not holding elected office. You ready for that? Marcus thought of every boardroom he'd been underestimated in, every resume that got tossed, every room he walked into knowing he'd have to be 10 times better just to be seen as equal. Then he smiled. I've been ready. And as the room fell into strategy and advisors leaned over papers and legal drafts, Marcus Caldwell, once fired by a racist CEO, once dismissed and overlooked, began laying the foundation for a new future, one where men like Richard Mallory no longer decided who got a seat at the table. Because Marcus wasn't just building a table, he was building a new room, and this time everyone had a key. 3 months later, the executive order was signed, cameras flashed, reporters scrambled to capture the moment. The gold-trimmed folder lay open on the resolute desk, and the president, after scrawling his signature, stood and held it up. Executive Order 14,287, he announced. The C Corporate Equity Accountability Act. Behind him stood Marcus Caldwell. No title placard, no prepared speech, just presence steady, unshakable. And when the president stepped aside and motioned for him to speak, the room held its breath. This isn't the end of something, Marcus said. It's the beginning. We're not punishing the past, we're reshaping the future. Equity doesn't happen by hope alone. It happens by structure, by law, by leaders who refuse to look away. The applause was thunderous. Journalists began pushing stories out in real time, and across America, corporate boards went into emergency sessions. Because now, noncompliance wasn't just bad PR, it was illegal. That night, Marcus walked alone through Lafayette Square. The chill of early autumn bit at his coat, but he didn't mind. He liked walking. It reminded him he was still human, that under the acclaim, under the titles and press photos, he was still just the kid from Atlanta who spent Saturdays at the barbershop listening to men talk about how the world worked and how they dreamed it could be. His phone buzzed. A text. Janine, CNN's calling you the most feared man in a suit. He chuckled, typed back. Marcus, not feared, respected, hopefully. Then another ping. Mom, you eat today, baby. He smiled even wider. Marcus, not yet. Working on it, she replied with a heart emoji and a photo of a peach cobbler she'd baked just in case he came home. He pocketed the phone, the warmth of her, care settling in his chest. Then, a voice behind him. You really shook the world, Caldwell. He turned. It was Evelyn Hargrove. Didn't expect to see you here, he said. I always walk after big days, she replied. Helps me remember I'm still part of the world I'm trying to fix. They walked together in silence for a bit. Then she asked, What's next for you? He exhaled. This order's only the start. Now we implement, enforce, educate, expand, and maybe create a pipeline that lasts long after I'm gone. She looked at him with something close to awe. You know what they're saying in corporate circles now, don't you? What's that? That every boardroom needs to ask, what would Caldwell think? He laughed softly. That's dangerous. No, that's justice. They reached the corner where their paths diverged. She turned to go, then paused. You ever think about running for office? Yeah. He raised an eyebrow. Not my style. Maybe. Or maybe it's exactly your style, and you just haven't realized it yet. She left him with that thought, disappearing into the night. The years passed. The Caldwell Equity Framework became standard practice. Other nations adopted similar models. Universities taught it. Multinational firms built internal divisions around it. And the corporate world learned that a man in a tailored suit who speaks with grace and holds receipts can be far more dangerous than a protest sign. But Marcus never forgot the beginning. He returned, quietly and unannounced, to the lobby where it all started. The receptionist was new, young, bright-eyed. "Can I help you?" she asked, not recognizing him. He looked around, noticed the updated art, the diversity of staff, the laughter echoing from a conference room. "No," he said, "just passing through." She smiled politely, but just before he left, he turned and asked, "Do you like working here?" She beamed. "Honestly, best job I've ever had. They care, really care." Marcus smiled. "Good." And then he walked out, coat fluttering in the wind, disappearing into the hum of the city like a ghost of revolution fulfilled. Some say the measure of a man is in the empire he builds, but Marcus Caldwell knew better. The true measure is in what survives you, in the systems that remain, the doors that stay open, the kids who stop, second-guessing whether they belong. He didn't change the world with rage. He changed it with proof, with patience, with presence, and, most of all, with the certainty that no one can erase the truth. Because the truth waits, and when it finally stands up, it never sits down again.